The definition of success goes beyond academics. Students don't have to go after the same yardstick and be stressed out with comparisons with others. Mr. Chan said this while answering questions in Parliament on the River Valley High incident.
Would the Minister be able to share how he thinks our education landscape should evolve over the years so that this idea of a very stressful, pressurizing environment would become less, and we have a more resilient student population and a more resilient society in the years ahead?
That constant strive for excellence itself is a positive stress for them to aspire to achieve more. But we must be very careful. We must be very careful that this strive for excellence to better themselves doesn't turn into a situation where the definition of success is dictated in someone else's image. There is an incessant and unrelenting comparison with somebody else.
One MP also asked if mental health literacy lessons can be taught to younger students.
The CCE curriculum on mental health literacy has been introduced for lower secondary levels and is in the midst of reviewing for primary schools. In this aspect, I wish to suggest or recommend that perhaps it's the right juncture to consider implementing it for a start for our primary 6 students onwards, and also involving their parents' participations.
We'll definitely take on Ms. Henny So's suggestions for us to see how we can implement earlier the revision to the CCE curriculum for the upper primary first.
Mr. Chan wrapped up by sharing a conversation he had with students who were classmates with the 16-year-old student who had been charged with murder.
2 of them told me the same thing, separately. They just have one simple request for me. They told me, "Minister, please help our friend, the 16-year-old. Please take care of him." They know it's a cry for help.
And for more, we're joined by Dr. Shawn Ee, a clinical psychologist and a psychoanalytic psychotherapist. Thanks for joining us. Firstly, how difficult is it to distinguish between normal stress, distress, and mental illness, and have the sources of pressure on young people evolved?
So I would say that stress is something that can be quite beneficial to us, and it helps us be able to operate at an optimal capacity. Too little, it might not motivate us sufficiently, but too much, it then causes us to lose track and lose focus. So what I would say about this is that stress is what we experience overall, what we call load on the entire system, psychologically speaking. So when it becomes kind of overwhelming for us, then that becomes a bit more distressing for us, where we find a sense of discomfort and almost approaching a traumatic response, such as what happened in the school. Yeah.
Dr. Ee, tackling mental health issues is being seen as a whole of community effort. Everyone plays some part. What do you see as the key gaps to this, and how can those gaps be addressed?
I think one of the major gaps that comes to mind is that we are not very used to looking past behavior. So what tends to occur when we look at either desirable or undesirable behavior is that we either want them here or want them off. So perhaps looking past behavior to include also our own relationship needs. So we understand that youth, they are still going through an adolescent period, trying to get a sense of the language, to express themselves, to regulate themselves, as well as a important psychological developmental milestone, actually. So what we can do is that we can guide and show them how by taking the lead. So if we feel a number of feelings as a result of certain distressing circumstances, it might be useful for us, just like we teach parents at the same time, to take the lead to speak about what they are afraid of, what they're angry about, what they're sad about. And this usually helps a lot of youth legitimize how they feel, and as a result, feel like they can share more with their parents.
A lot has been said on reducing stigmatization when it comes to mental health issues. How, in your mind, how are we faring with that, and what can be done to create enough safe spaces for individuals that are under strain?
I think as internally quite a conservative nation, right, I think sometimes it's really quite difficult for us to challenge what we are quite familiar with in terms of our belief systems, our familiarity regarding trying to address certain emotions in our context. So I suppose the first port of call, perhaps, as mentioned before, might be for us to just get the conversation going. Talk about what is something that might be quite difficult. And from there, we can start to facilitate talking and normalizing almost how it feels like to talk about your feelings. Okay, and if we can, as a community, start to open up kind of these conversations, automatically people might start to feel safe a bit more. But second point being, if we were to want to encourage youth and anybody else, right, teachers, students, parents, vendors, anyone around the whole ecosystem, we want to encourage people to approach individuals that they feel safe first. Okay, and safety, a safe space would be encouraged by actually being able to speak to someone, anyone that they feel safe with, right? And that can be defined as someone that will not judge them, that will not evaluate them, or will not shame them for sharing particular feelings or opinions. So many people have told me, right? Many youth has told me before that if I were to share something and it's not the popular opinion, I'm gonna feel like people might say I'm too emotional, I'm too emo, I'm too drama. Then I don't want to share anymore. And the same thing can happen in households and also at schools.
Dr. Ee, a quick final question for you. Minister Chan spoke about building this communal safety net to perhaps incorporate, prevention both from, the government as well as within the community, that's how far we have to go. But what do you think the success of that type of prevention, how far can it go?
I think as a starting point, it's a great way to get everyone involved. Having been in public health for a vast number of years, I think we've started off wanting to put in money into the National Mental Health Blueprint, which is great at starting off this national-wide kind of way of wanting to help us get more, informed mental health literacy as well as destigmatization. So, following all these events, as well as the COVID pandemic, our mental health has been under fire pretty much. So I think there's no other better time for us to start this conversation, since we can strike while the fire is quite hot, the iron is hot, and such that we can then encourage everybody to legitimize that whatever that we feel that's quite difficult, suffering, can actually be made better by sharing a bit further. Yeah, it's a good start, because we know that from the research that if we were to involve community support, social support is a huge protective factor for mental health.
Dr. Ee, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us this evening. Dr. Shawn Ee from Psychology Practice.